BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin.
Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? Just a couple of quick announcements and reminders before we truly begin. And the first is that I would like to apologize for this Black Box Online Radio episode coming out late. I always try to upload the episodes in the morning. As of the recent times for the last 6 months, I've been trying to put them out in the mornings regularly. And I had recorded the episode, and I sat down to put it all together, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, I really want to get Zodiac Monday up for you guys, but for some reason there was this weird background noise that was going on, a very odd type of clicking sound, and I'm not even sure the source of it, but that recording turned out to be unsuitable. So thank you for your patience, and if you're listening to this in the playlist, you can just carry on. It's going to be totally normal. But yes, welcome to the Zodiac Killer News Report, part of Black Box Online Radio. And Black Box Online Radio has a page at BuyMeACoffee.com, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88. And that website allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out here on Zodiac Monday. And the Black Box Online Radio membership has been launched on BuyMeACoffee.com. And there are bonus features and bonus content that is available through that website. And I've decided to make an additional feature, an additional perk to the membership. And at least once a month, I'm going to do a private members-only podcast. And I'm really hoping that it can go beyond some of the subjects that are covered regularly here on Black Box Online Radio, because I want it to be interactive with the listeners, and people can ask whatever type of question they would choose to ask. They can answer, I can answer anything that people have or discuss subjects that are requested by people in the audience. But the reason why I wanted to go beyond the regular subjects like Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer and Unsolved Mysteries is because you can already just ask me that stuff here in the comments section, and I will talk about it here on Zodiac Monday and on Ripper Wednesday. So maybe it can get a little bit more personal, and if it's a private members-only podcast, then many subjects would be fair game. So that will be something that will be happening at least once a month. But if I can be very honest with you guys, I think that it should be available more than once a month, because I followed the show Crime After Crime for about 4 years. It's hosted by the YouTubers Daniel Hallen and John Lorden, and it's a monthly podcast. And I really thought, I love this show. I love the way they do it. I love their narration and how they've put the show together, and it's still up and running, Crime After Crime, and I confess I haven't followed it super closely over the last several months, but because it's a monthly podcast, it comes out the first of every month, then there's so much time in between, and you lose focus, and then you don't think about the episode, and I wouldn't even remember if I didn't get the YouTube notifications. So I would love to do this like members only, very personal, in-depth show at least once a week, if possible, but, there is life outside of YouTube, and already the show is coming out 3 times a week, so please look out for some of those things in the near future, and if you would like to join the Black Box Online Radio membership, you'll get loads of bonus content, and even have access to these new member podcasts that would be coming out here on YouTube, only done in the private way. And because this is the Zodiac Killer News Report, there's a very big piece of Zodiac news, and that is that we are counting down the days to the release of the Peacock show, The Myth of the Zodiac Killer, once again available on the Peacock streaming service. And it is going to feature Professor Thomas Henry Horn, who is the author of The Myth of the Zodiac Killer and the host of the Stones Unturned podcast. And in the original episode that I had recorded for you guys, it was about 50 minutes long, and I spent 40 minutes talking about the myth of the Zodiac Killer and all of the observations that I had made about the Zodiac hoax theory over the years. And I was reminded of an episode of Bulldog Mindset. That is a channel that is run by the YouTuber John Sonmez, and he had a guest on his show who was talking about video editing, and he said, sometimes you can take a 30-minute video and condense it down to 6 minutes. And I think that this, maybe I could condense my 40-minute ramblings on the myth of the Zodiac Killer down to maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So let's just go very quickly. Yes, there will be a new show that is going to feature Thomas Henry Horn, and his theory in the Zodiac Killer mystery is going to be examined. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who operated in California in 1968 and 69. Whatever happened before or after that is anybody's guess, and it's still an unsolved case. And Thomas Horn is and still is a researcher who supports the Zodiac hoax theory. The idea that the murders that took place in 1968 and 69 were committed by an unrelated group of people, and that they were united by someone writing letters taking credit for crimes that he did not commit. Thomas Horn also proposes that this person is Hal Snook, Harold K. Snook, a forensics investigator, narcotics investigator, the founder of the California Narcotics Association, an organization which still exists. And I confess that Hal Snook has some very similar handwriting to the Zodiac Killer, but there are also other suspects out there who have very similar handwriting. John Parr Cox might be the suspect whom I think has the most similar handwriting, and he is featured on the channel Real Zodiac Killer Revealed 2023, and also he's a suspect of Adam Ivester, who runs that channel. One more time, John Parr Cox. So when I was talking about the Zodiac hoax theory in the original episode that I had recorded, I shared one thing, and that is that about 2 years ago, I appeared on Drew Beeson's channel, and he asked me the question, you were into the Zodiac hoax theory for a while, right? And my honest answer was, well, yes, but I was very hesitant to answer that question because there were 2 reasons why. Firstly, I never endorsed the hoax theory. I was curious about a theory involving multiple participants, that because all of these Zodiac crimes are so different, the Lake Herman Road murders with the deaths of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, and then the Blue Rock Springs shooting that saw the death of Darlene Ferrin, they're committed in very different ways, but mostly you have a person who snuck up on some people in a parked car. But then you have the Lake Berryessa stabbing, where the Zodiac Killer is wearing the hooded costume and now attacking the victims by knife and tying them up. And then you have the Stein murder, where you have a single male being targeted as opposed to a man and a woman who are together in somewhat of a secluded area. And Paul Stein was murdered in Presidio Heights in San Francisco. And back in 2019, when I first learned about the hoax theory, I was very curious about a theory involving multiple participants, and Thomas Horn answered a lot of those questions, and he provided some connecting material, and I still think to this day that he has a reasonable point about how the first 2 crimes, the Lake Herman Road murders and the Blue Rock Springs shooting, could have been committed by a person who was not even the Zodiac, but they were drug-related or gang-related shootings. But I never endorsed the hoax theory for the following reason. I always said that it was possible that a single perpetrator could have done it, and he just committed the crimes in a different way. I mean, he doesn't have to commit the murders in the exact same manner or fashion for every single crime. In fact, criminals don't play by the rules. They break them. That's why they're criminals. And there is a second reason, though, and giving a shout out to YouTube user Jamie Hendrickson, who followed the show for a long time BBOR listener, who said something that persuaded me in a different direction when he wrote out that, if anything, Thomas Horn has just proposed Hal Snook as a Zodiac Killer suspect, or that he is his suspect in the Zodiac Killer mystery. And let's be very, very clear. Thomas Horn does not accuse Hal Snook of all of the murders. This was a comment that was shared by Jamie Hendrickson, and he got me thinking in a different way, and I actually began to think that that was somewhat of a more credible theory or a more likely theory, that Hal Snook was the Zodiac killer. And one of the reasons for this is he had a very strong resemblance to the composite sketch that was drawn after the murder of Paul Stein, and that, I actually saw a photo of Hal Snook that I had never seen before out of the corner of my eye. I was on a laptop computer and then just on Google Images messing around, and I wasn't paying attention too closely, and I saw, oh, hey, there's a photo of Hal Snook that I haven't seen before, and it wasn't even a photo. It was actually the Zodiac Killer composite sketch. I mean, the famous one. It was just the Zodiac composite sketch, and I was like, oh, I mistook the Zodiac composite for Hal Snook's black and white photo. I do think that he has a strong resemblance, and for a while Thomas Horn accused Hal Snook of murdering Paul Stein, and saying that, it's possible he really didn't have a very strong way of connecting it all together. It's just that Hal has somewhat of a resemblance. So I also looked at this in an episode that I did called Hal Snook as a Suspect. I have a 4-part playlist on Hal Snook as in his involvement in the Zodiac Killer mystery. And I've talked about a lot of that previously on Black Box Online Radio, so I want to just share something that I haven't talked to you guys about a lot, and that is that I wanted to explore the hoax theory. I actually was reading up on it from 2019 to 2021, so yes, I was very curious what Thomas Horn had to say, and I listened to his show, the Stones Unturned podcast, and I think by 2021, I was so far down the wormhole or the rabbit hole, maybe rabbit hole's a better way of looking at it, that I had an idea to compose a short story. I estimated that it would have been about 30 pages long, and I wanted to write Hal Snook's thought process when he would have been composing the Zodiac hoax theory, and definitely would not be any type of true crime story. It would be somewhat of a historical fiction thing, only saying historical because it would be talking about real people, Hal Snook and the journalist Keith Power, who worked for the San Francisco Chronicle, and I had this plan. I knew exactly how I would arrange it, but I didn't do it. I decided not to do that because, number one, I had already from the beginning thought this is something that I would have to give away for free. I mean, it's just taking someone else's true crime theory and presenting it in somewhat of a fictitious way. We're adding in certain fictitious elements, and I don't think that that's pure evil, or I don't think that's a bad thing to do as long as you're clear that it's fiction. It's just inspired by real people. But the reason why I chose not to write that one was I simply just didn't want to use someone else's research as the foundation for my own short story, and I decided to leave that for Thomas Henry Horn. Now, I guess I can share this with you guys. Maybe he's even said so on the Zodiac episodes on the Stones Unturned, or back when he had the channel Professor Dad. I think he did indeed share this, that there are many different elements to this hoax theory, that someone was writing letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit, and he has copyrighted the movie idea for the Zodiac hoax theory. And I have since stepped away from a lot of these things involving multiple killers and the Zodiac mystery, as well as the idea of Hal Snook being a suspect. I think that a lot of it was I was just fixated on him at the time because it was part of my research journey into the Zodiac world, and I found a way to make the narrative fit. As Ken Maines, who's the host of the YouTube show Unsolved No More and was on the History Channel Zodiac show, said, you can make any suspect fit. And that's what I did in my own mind with Hal Snook. And I think that a very good place for the Zodiac hoax theory would be in a movie or a TV show that Thomas Horn had created, if he does go on to create or produce this movie. But I am eagerly awaiting the Peacock show. I am eagerly awaiting to see what they're going to say about the Zodiac hoax theory. And I want to know if it's going to be challenged. In fact, I hope that it's going to be challenged. I hope that they have some very strong challenges, because it is not enough to just put out something and say, okay, well, this is a true crime theory, I hope that they give it a very thorough examination, because that's what I think a lot of you guys in the audience are going to be looking for, and that's what I'm going to be looking for. I want to know how this particular theory is going to hold up under the scrutiny of people and from people who have the resources to investigate it, and they can get their own team of private investigators to look at his observations. So that'll be released in maybe, 9 or 10 days from the time of this recording, maybe actually even about 7 or 8. I'll go double check the release date, but it's going to be coming out very soon, and I'll definitely be doing a response here on Black Box Online Radio, and you can always hit the like button and subscribe if you want to follow along with all of these true crime discussions. Now, there are some new Zodiac Killer videos that are out online. One of them is on the French Wrecking Crew, and it is done by Jerome, and he has been a longtime supporter of BBOR, and he has a chat with Drew Beeson. That's just what it's called. Let's Chat with Drew H. Beeson, talking about the Zodiac Killer, and Drew also has a D.B. Cooper suspect named Ted B. Braden, and there is also a new set of videos out on Ray Grant's YouTube channel, and you can find that by searching on YouTube for Zodiac Killer Ray Grant or Ray Grant Zodiac. Those things should direct you right to his page, and you can watch his videos. The first video that I saw from Ray Grant on his YouTube channel was talking about the timeline and the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. Now, Sherry Jo Bates was murdered in 1966 on October 30th of that year, and some people think that that was indeed the first crime of the Zodiac's, serial killer spree. However, other people, such as myself, do not believe that Sherry Bates was murdered by the Zodiac. And also in 2021, I had the opportunity to read Ray Grant's book, Zodiac Killer Solved, and he talks about a different theory involving multiple participants. And he has 4 participants in his theory, and he more or less says that it was a sinister form of conceptual art, and the 4 people were involved with the planning process. And it was something that is heavily dealing with mathematical signatures, and there are clues that have been left behind, or it was orchestrated in a very calculated way. And there are definite reasons why the victims were chosen. There are reasons why this was all put together, and the 4 participants are Michael O'Hare's mother, Berta Margulies, Ray Grant's other suspect is Gareth Penn. I didn't mean to misspeak like that. Gareth Penn and Gareth Penn's father, Hugh Penn. There are 4 participants who are frequently referred to as the 4 Zodiacs. And if you listen to that episode that I did in 2021, I said very clearly that the best part of his book was discussing the timeline and the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, because the first time I ever read Ray Grant's name was on a forum. I think it was actually a Reddit post. And he was talking about how there's a popular misconception that Sherry Jo Bates left home at 6:30 p.m. on October 30th of 1966. And that was the first time that I had become aware of that information. I was like, what do you mean that's not true? I must have said that at some point on Black Box Online Radio. And he gives a very, very detailed breakdown in his book. I mean, as I said, I read it on a forum post, years before I read his book. So, I was aware of the timeline issue, but in his book, he shows a very clear breakdown of the life and daily activities of Sherry Jo Bates prior to her murder, and a lot of this is shared in the video. And Ray Grant is also a supporter of the abduction theory, that Sherry Jo Bates was abducted prior to her murder. And, when you watch his video, he shows some very convincing points about how there are just inaccuracies. There are things that don't quite stand out. Like, Sherry Jo Bates was a very popular and outgoing and well recognized and well liked person, yet there is almost no mention of her being in the library at the time. And also, that did she actually spend her entire time in the library? And some people try to account for that by saying that they think that it was a cover story, that she actually went to meet her ex-boyfriend Bob Barnett, but the crime isn't committed in a way that would indicate that she was murdered by an ex-boyfriend. Instead, that it seems like something quite different was going on. But Ray Grant does make some very good observations when discussing the timeline and the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. And to the credit of both Ray Grant and Thomas Henry Horan, they had the idea that the Zodiac Killer mystery is not a conventional serial killer mystery. There is something different about this. It's not just some sexually frustrated man who hated his mother and went on to murder prostitutes. Those crimes are terrible, absolutely terrible. But I mean, that is something that where there isn't a lot of depth, there aren't different layers to truly explore. It's just that it was a sexually frustrated man who hated his mother, so he murdered sex workers because it fueled his own excitement. No, Ray Grant and Thomas Howard were both on to something when they began to examine the story in a different way. And this is also something else that I haven't really talked to you guys about a lot, and that is that Scott Adams is the cartoonist behind the show Dilbert, and also the comic strip Dilbert. Dilbert was a very short-lived TV show. It's more famous for the comic strips, which came first. I believe they launched in 1989. And Scott Adams is also the host of the show Real Coffee on YouTube. And he talks a lot about persuasion tactics. He has two books out that really explore this. His book, Win Bigly, Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter, gets really more into the differences between facts and persuasion tactics. Now, Thomas Henry Horan, author of The Myth of the Zodiac Killer, has publicly challenged people to debate him, including Tom Voigt and Michael Butterfield and Mike Morford and other Zodiac Killer researchers. And I also talked to him about some other people that he would consider talking to, even if it's not a full-on debate, and he says that he will debate anyone. And when it comes to persuasion tactics, Thomas Horan gets an A+. Not an A, an A+. He can be mean, but in just the right way, where you're still somewhat on his side. He can make you laugh at unexpected times, and he can turn the situation around on the other person and embarrass them and expose weaknesses. And even if you might think the other person is right in a factual way, he can become very persuasive. Again, not an A, he gets an A+ in terms of persuasion tactics. So, if anything, I think that he is a reasonably entertaining broadcaster. In fact, he's a very entertaining broadcaster when I follow the Stones Unturned, and he talks about not only true crime cases such as the Zodiac Killer, but also just the functions of society and the global elites and the New World Order and the secret cults that could be operating in America. Very, very insightful stuff that has been shared over there, even if I don't agree with all of his true crime observations. And as I said one more time, I can't wait for the Peacock show to be released. Now, let's talk about something else involving the Zodiac Killer mystery, and I would like to give a shout out to Dennis D., who has shared something again about the Zodiac Killer and the Presidio Heights timeline, because I gave Dennis the opportunity to share some things with me about how the Zodiac Killer could have been moving around after the murder of Paul Stein on October 11th of 1969, the Zodiac Killer's final confirmed crime. And Dennis says that I would like to show how easy it was for the Zodiac to evade capture. The purpose of this theory is to demonstrate how close the Zodiac was to Officer Armin Pellicetti on foot and officers Falk and Selms in the patrol car. That, of course, is Donald Falk and Eric Selms. So, after the murder of Paul Stein, the Zodiac gets out of the taxicab. He is seen wiping it down. He was witnessed by Lindsay and Rebecca Robbins, and the Robbins kids went on to become the sources for the famous composite sketch of the Zodiac Killer. And it's possible that Lindsay Robbins then went up to Paul Stein's body and he tried to lift him up, but he was unable to do so, and then he touched the inside of the cab door, and it's possible, possible that Lindsay Robbins was the source of the bloody fingerprint that was left behind, but that is still somewhat uncertain as of now. So then the Zodiac Killer is walking down the street, and you guys know the famous story that two officers saw him, and they didn't try to arrest him because they had received an all-points bulletin that they should be on the lookout for a black man who was referred to as an NMA at the time, Negro Male Adult. But this was, of course, the Zodiac Killer. The whole thing to be on the lookout for a black man was a pure mistake. So let's hear some more about what Dennis D. thinks happened after the Zodiac Killer is walking away from Paul Stein and the murder scene. Officers Pelisetti and Peta arrive at the corner of Washington and Cherry and see Paul Stein shot dead in his cab. Witnesses point out that the shooter walked north on Cherry. Peta secures the scene, and witnesses are told to get off the street, and Pelisetti has on foot north on Cherry and turns east on Jackson. I propose that the Zodiac knows he's being followed and simply hides somewhere on Jackson between Cherry and Maple. Pelisetti walks right past the Zodiac and continues east to Maple, where he says he looks southward. He then returns to walk along the same street heading west on Jackson and unknowingly passes the Zodiac again before turning south on Cherry. And because I've discussed this with Dennis D. in the past, he states very clearly that the Zodiac killer could have been hiding in the alcoves in the buildings, because this is a crime that was not committed in a secluded area like Lake Berryessa or Lake Herman Road. I mean, especially not off on the side of the road, like Lake Herman Road, just in some type of turnout. This would have been in a city. Officer Falcon's Elms patrol car headed west on Jackson, north on Orgello, east on Pacific, and south on Spruce, west on Jackson again, where they passed the Zodiac at house 3712, then turn south to almost immediately meet up with Pelisetti. I believe that this serious sound, but more importantly, I believe that the Zodiac watched Pelisetti pass him twice, and when he thought the coast was clear, he continued eastbound only to be spotted seconds later. He didn't even reach Maple, making the total walking distance along Jackson less than 1 block. I find it beyond spooky that Officer Pelisetti had no idea then how close he was to the Zodiac, who was armed with a pistol and that was missing only 1 bullet. He may have realized this only after finding out that Falcon's Elms passed him. Either way, I propose that the Zodiac killed Paul Stein, hid, and observed an officer on foot pass him twice, only to be spotted by 2 officers in a car, and still walked away. Officer Pelisetti had no idea how close he was to being murdered himself, but let's look at the other side of the coin. Was the Zodiac full of adrenaline after killing Paul Stein? Witnesses say that he walked away slowly. He may have been aware he was being followed, or did he get scared, or did he keep his cool? Did he then observe a police officer pass him? Okay, now I think that perhaps I can answer the question, and that is that a lot of people believe that the Zodiac killer was either a psychopath or a sociopath, and that the reason why he was able to walk away from Paul Stein's murder scene so calmly was that psychopaths are very good at not losing control of their emotions under situations like that. And I always have to go back to the YouTube psychologist Dr. Romney, who said in the first video that I ever watched on psychopathy that a serial killer who's a psychopath could have a dead body in the trunk of his car, and if he got stopped by a police officer, he's going to be as cool as a cucumber, and that he's not going to give away any signs that he was actually a murderer. And I think that all of that is true with the Zodiac killer. Now, the video that I had watched from Dr. Romney was very eye-opening for me, and it shared a lot of information about psychopaths. However, it turned out that some of the things that she had said were a little bit misleading. For example, she said that psychopaths are blank on the inside, and somebody openly called me out on that in the comments section, saying, hey, that's completely not true. Psychopaths have emotions. They're not completely blank on the inside. And when you look at serial killers who are being interviewed, who are most likely clinical psychopaths or sociopaths, they express all types of emotions. Instead, what I think she meant was that they are blank on the inside in terms of a conscience and a moral compass, and they're just indifferent to other people, and they only want to manipulate to fuel their own excitement. That's what I think that she meant, and I saw that stuff about 5 years ago when I was following her channel somewhat closely. But, I mean, I think that the comment about a psychopath not giving away any of the signs that he has just committed a murder, he might be full of adrenaline, but still able to be in control of his facial expressions, mannerisms, and emotions. And we also have to remember another commonly held belief about serial killers that, I mean, it relates to psychopathic serial killers, that if they get caught in the act, and they have the ability to talk their way out of it, they're going to try to talk their way out of it, because it always goes back to emotional manipulation. And it's the idea that somebody is not necessarily going to try and use violence to get out of it. Violence would only be a last resort. Instead, this person wants to use use mental trickery to get out of it. And it's quite possible that Dennis D is right that the Zodiac left the murder scene after he killed Paul Stein and went to the alcoves and was hiding right there, and Officer Armin Pellicetti walked past him twice. But there is a little bit more here that is continued. Now, witnesses say that he walked away slowly, and he may have been aware that he was being followed. Now, did he get scared? Did he keep his cool as he hid, then observed by the officer pass him? It was less than a block's distance where the officer started heading back towards him. Was he in a clear rush? Was it another rush? Other than the patrol car heading his way, again a panic, a rush, or something else. He was observed walking with a slow gait, but making an effort to not have his face seen. This seems like we were still in control. I think it means he was still in control, playing it cool. Once the car passed right by, it was a relief, elation, a major rush, a victory. I don't know, but in his following letter, he boasted about the killings and said that he would have been caught if they had parked and waited for me to come out of cover. And I believe the Zodiac also said that he entered into the park and that they would have caught him with search dogs if they had searched a nearby park. But that is something that I'm adding to this comment. That's a lot of info to digest, but I think that it will be very clear to anyone who watches Zodiac Monday, especially if you include the map during your entire narration. Well, I mean, there's what you've been seeing going by on the screen, and I thank you very much to Dennis D, who has written the statement out for Black Box Online Radio. Now, while some people think that the first Zodiac crime was the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966, other people, such as myself, believe that the first Zodiac crime was the Lake Herman Road murders on December 20th of 1968, and this saw the deaths of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. And I talked a little bit about the abduction theory involving Sherry Jo Bates, but Ray Grant, author of Zodiac Killer Solved, also shared something about how the victims could have been abducted prior to the Lake Herman Road murders. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. Ray Grant was the first person to ever share that info with me, or to share that, he states it in interviews and in his book, he talks about this. So when it comes to the Lake Herman Road murders, one of you guys in the comments section even wrote this out about how some type of abduction theory could have taken place. That firstly, David Faraday was driving the car, and that somebody could have held him up at gunpoint at a different place, maybe ordered them out of the car, ordered them back in, and that person got in the car with them and just instructed them to drive to an unknown location. And bear in mind, you would have some stranger holding them up with a .22 caliber firearm, and David complied. Then they got to the location at Lake Herman Road, and then they were ordered out of the vehicle, and that's when the Zodiac murdered them. Another variant that was shared by a different person in the comments section was that this could have been a case where there was a suspicious vehicle following them. This is getting away from the abduction theory, but rather provides an explanation as to how and why David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen ended up in the parking lot on Lake Herman Road. And firstly, it would be that the car could have been trailing them for a very long time, and that they simply just saw this suspicious vehicle that was following them, and very obviously and deliberately following them. So David Faraday just simply pulled over because he wanted to know if the car was going to keep following them or to stop. Have you guys ever had that experience? I definitely have, driving the West Virginia back roads, where I noticed that there was this car following me once. I think I was 17 at the time, the same age that David Faraday was. I just got off my shift from Pizza Hut, and I was driving, and I noticed that every turn that I made, this car was following me. And I pulled into different locations, and this car just kept following me. So what I decided to do was I just pulled into a random neighborhood, and the car kept following me. So I pulled over onto the side of the road on actually a patch of grass, and the car just drove on by. Now, it could be a pure coincidence that could have just been somebody who lived in that neighborhood. That could have just been somebody who was also trying to go home from work. And it wasn't my neighborhood. I didn't recognize the vehicle or anything. I pulled into a random place because I wanted to. It just seemed very suspicious. But yes, I pulled over on the side of the road. But the big difference is that that car that was following me drove on and kept continuing, whereas the car that had been following David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen would have also parked David Faraday might have even voluntarily got out of the car just to say, "Hey, excuse me, what's going on? Are you following me?" And that's when the Zodiac killer pulled out the gun. So that doesn't quite meet the criteria of an abduction, but the first situation would if that someone ordered them to get in their car at gunpoint and then instructed them to drive different places. That could reasonably meet the definition of an abduction. But what do you guys think about the Lake Herman Road murders? I know I've been talking about it a lot on the Zodiac killer news reports, but I think that it's just something that is it's an unsolved case, and we're still trying to examine the different possibilities and aspects of it. But I also want to share some other things with you guys, and giving a shout out to longtime BBOR follower, longtime Black Box Online Radio follower and BBOR supporter, Batman66. That was a little bit difficult for me to say, but I think I finally made it there in the end. And he has sent me 2 photographs of someone who seems to meet the physical description of the Zodiac killer. The only problem is this is an unknown person, and he is standing next to a symbol that does possibly have a Zodiac killer connection, and he has only shared that the person is deceased, and that he also shows a symbol from the state of Nevada where Zodiac researcher Faisal Zarawi also found a Zodiac rock formation in the state of Nevada as well. And there are a few different, the Sierra Nevadas. I was getting a little bit ahead of myself because that's the next point that I want to go with. To be clear, Batman66 showed me the photos of the Sierra Nevadas. But let's be clear. It is possible that there is a Zodiac Killer Nevada connection in at least 3 different ways. Number 1, there's the Zodiac Killer suspect, Lawrence Kane, who lived in Nevada, and he worked in the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino, which is in State Line, Nevada. It's also possible that he committed the 1974 murder of Dana Lull in Nevada. Then, of course, we have the disappearance of Donna Lass on September 6th of 1970, which could have been committed by the Zodiac Killer, or could have been an unidentified unrelated perpetrator who also may have worked in the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino where Donna Lass did. Now, Kane and Lass both worked in the Sahara Tahoe, but when did they actually start working together? Did they know each other? Those are things that still seem to be somewhat of a mystery. And then there is the 1986 Zodiac letter, which talks about how that there are crimes that have been committed over CA and NA. Now, this is something that most people think means Nevada, but you guys already are thinking that the abbreviation for Nevada is NV, right? Not NA. And I first thought of calcium and sodium, and I mean all of these elemental things. And this just goes back to a larger theory that some people think the Zodiac Killer was a scientist, and even Robert Graysmith talked about this in his Zodiac Killer books, that his suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, had a high understanding of chemistry, that Arthur Lee Allen could even teach a chemistry class if he wanted to, although you probably shouldn't hire him. He was a terrible person. He was a pedophile. But, I mean, that's something that I just have to throw an interjection in about Arthur Lee Allen. He was not a dumb guy. He may have come across as a dumb guy. Absolutely a criminal. Absolutely a terrible person. But I think that we're at a certain point now where we want to explore different leads and different possibilities and look at how some of these things can all come together. And I'm totally willing to discuss different suspects, and I want to know, I mean, maybe there is a stronger connection to the Sierra Nevadas and the state of Nevada. And the final thing that I will share with you guys in this Zodiac Killer news report is that I've been discussing a Zodiac suspect named Loring Dale Hill recently on the channel, and LD Hill is the suspect of Melissa Rose Tappa and Thornton Daniel Jeffrey. They are a research duo, and a lot of you guys were asking for samples of their handwriting, of his handwriting, the Zodiac suspect Loring D. Hill, and we have just a few that have been shared in their group, The Zodiac Killer and Me, which I invite you to follow, and Thornton Daniel Jeffrey and Melissa Rose Tappa are also running the website ZodiacKillerBomb.com. I think their explanations and explorations into the Zodiac Killer timeline is very promising, and I'm quite curious to know how far they're going to go with Loring Dale Hill. Now, I think it was Stefan in the comment section in the Facebook group who said, okay, they have a few handwriting samples that have been shared, but there is not a lot that we have to go on yet, and I want to see more. because I'm at a point now where I will discuss suspects whom I think could be strong and promising, and then I'll also not really talk about suspects that are extremely outrageous and far out, because I've really found that you guys in the comment section think they have no credibility, and I also think that they have no credibility, and it is just not the best use of time for a channel like this. And right now, I would like to get to your shoutouts on Black Box Online Radio, and anyone who supports the show via BuyMeACoffee.com or the Super Thanks on YouTube will get a shout out. And this week, I'm giving the shout outs to the premium members. Firstly, we have Batman66, who has not only been a supporter of BBOR using BuyMeACoffee.com and the Super Thanks, Batman66 has provided an enormous amount of info and ideas for the show, and has really shared a lot of written text that I've read off in numerous episodes, and he has become a premium member. And I look forward to discussing things on the user members only podcast. And also, I mean, there is something that I have written for the Black Box Online Radio membership, and it's a guide called True Crime Teaches Us to Conquer Toxic People, and that should be released this weekend. You'll also get the Black Box Online Radio newsletter, and I'm going to put more or less this book that I've written, although it's just a guide. I call that. It's only about 50 pages long. And the next supporter in the Black Box Online Radio membership is Stefan, and Stefan has also written some very good things. He's the one who wrote the essay on the Exorcist letter, which I discussed here on Black Box Online Radio, and he's made some very strong observations about the linguistic usage in the Zodiac killer mystery. And the third Black Box Online Radio Premium member is Ray Grant, author of Zodiac Killer Solved, whom I've been discussing throughout this episode. And I invite more of you guys to check out the BBOR membership, so perhaps we can have some weekly discussions that are going to get very personal, and think about those things, like what is something that you would really want to talk about, but you don't really want to say publicly, so you're only around a small group of people. It could be true crime related, or it could be reminiscent of the older AMAs that I used to do on this show, where I would discuss many different subjects, and it was an AMA. Ask me anything. And I wanted to make it very clear that any subject was fair game, anything under the sun or in the darkness. And I would talk about psychology and relationships and narcissism. I used to get this weekly question about narcissism sent to my email address, and I was like, well, why not use that for the AMAs? And I talked a lot about TV shows and movies. Ask me anything. So I'm hoping something like that will happen for the BBOR membership episode. Well, thank you so much for listening to this one, and anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and I will see you over on Instagram. Goodbye.